Everybody, welcome back to Leosophy. I got 3 questions, so let's see. Okay. Why did people use bloodletting back in the day? Yeah. It's funny. Whenever we come up to a conclusion that something's barbaric or dumb, we usually end up finding a grain of truth in it at some point. Kind of reminds me of that whole egg thing. Is it good for you or is it bad for you? And they keep going back and forth. And similarly, the height of ignorance by the modern standpoint, they love to point that out. If you're against some questionable new surgical technique, well, why don't we just go back to bloodletting? It's sort of like the ultimate insult that someone's not progressive enough in terms of their view of science and medicine. They're just like a medieval barber. Well, funny enough, we're actually finding that it does have benefits, and this is probably where this came from. Someone had edema or blood pooling from an injury or some sort of inflammatory response, and when they were cut, perhaps even by accident, it was observed, the swelling went down and it saved them. It's the same thing with trepanation. Trepanation is drilling a hole in your head. It's seen as a crazy backwards practice. But if someone has a head injury and their brain is expanding, like what killed Bruce Lee, his was an allergic response to, if I remember right, aspirin, but it might have been ibuprofen, then drilling a hole is actually going to save their life. Well, similarly, in cases of those severe instances where blood ends up pooling in the wrong spot or going to the wrong spot, usually as an inflammatory response or an allergic response, that can save their life, right? Well, similarly, sorry, I'm just saving another document. There we go. Sorry about that. Anyway, what's interesting about that, though, is now we're finding that donating blood regularly, which isn't that different in terms of what happens to you as a person from bloodletting. It's different in that it helps people, but blood donation turns out actually is good for people. It encourages your body to replace old cells with newer, healthier cells, which means you're less likely to have cancer, because that's really where cancer comes from damaged DNA, and the older a cell gets, the more likely it's going to incur damage to its DNA. There's actually a number of positive net benefits that people are finding from that. Additionally, one of the biggest issues facing people, at least in the West, is heart disease, and the overall viscosity, I was trying to think of the right word, of a person's blood can have an effect on that. And that's one of the reasons why so many old-timers take blood thinners, right? Well, blood thinning would have a similar effect, or bloodletting, rather. And by the way, this is not an endorsement for bloodletting. I'm not saying that we should bring back the old-timey barbers. A lot of that stemmed from the fact that they just hadn't accumulated the knowledge that we have. And in part, I'm very, like I said in several other videos, I'm very pro-medieval period. A lot of people like to malign it as this backwards, dark period, but it was actually when we made the most scientific progress of any other era. It was a really amazing period in terms of cultivating knowledge. It just so happens that they hadn't cultivated what we know now. And it's not because we're better than them. It's because we're standing on their shoulders. That expression is true. We're standing on the shoulders of giants. And the people who did the bloodletting, they had some knowledge. They understood that there were benefits to it. And, over time they accumulated enough information and data that now we do things differently. And I'm glad that we have modern medical practices thanks to that. But bloodletting's not as bad a practice as people think. The big problem was it was before germ theory, so you're very likely to get an illness just from the instruments. It was very crude, the process itself. And additionally, because they used leeches and things like that, which again, also a really great thing. Leeches can be great for surgery and also good as a blood thinner. Their saliva, but it was kind of hard to know how much to take from people, and that could weaken people. Some people even say that that's what killed George Washington, the medical treatment for his cold. I'm a little skeptical of it. I don't think there's enough documentation. I'm not going to get into it, though, because really it's something I need to research further before I even have an opinion on it. But I hope that answers your question. Next question. Thoughts on sky burial? I think it's cool. I think it's the most metal way to go, and I wish that it was a more normal practice. That being said, for everybody who doesn't know, in Tibet they have a practice called sky burial, and within the parameters of Buddhism, when a person dies, their body is not them. It's literally just a hunk of meat at that point. And what Tibetan monks do is they take someone who, again, was probably their friend. They wrap them up in kind of like a mummy. They wrap them up in cloth. They break their bones. They just crunch them up, smash them up a bit, and then carry them up to a mountaintop and just dump them and let vultures eat them. The logic being that that's not their friend anymore, and what are you going to do with a body? You might as well put it to good use and help somebody. And I'd like to think that it came about because a bunch of monks were talking in front of their dead friend, and they're just like, what are we going to do with this body? I feel like we should bury it. Who would benefit from a dead body? And then like a 90s sitcom, they all said in unison, vultures. Something like that. That's really what they do. They feed the monks to vultures. It's a very, very gruesome procedure, process, ritual, what have you. You can watch it if you want to on YouTube, but I highly recommend you use discretion. And if you are under 18, do not watch it because it's pretty gruesome. Let me drop the last question. Okay, what is hybrid vigor? That is one of the hardest questions I've got. I can answer what it is, but it leads to a few more questions. Okay. Hybrid vigor is the phenomena in which it's been noticed that, I almost said species, the hybrids between two species often exhibit exaggerated traits like health and strength and other behavior lacking in both parents. And a great example of this would be mules. Mules are stronger than horses and donkeys. Another example is a lot of hybrid flowers. They're just hardier. They're tougher. They can withstand more. They get bigger and so on. And another great example, interesting, would be if you look at dolphins, the combination between, I think it's a killer whale and a dolphin, which they're both porpoises, so they're not, a lot of people think it's a half whale, but it's actually, whales are different from porpoises. Anyway, getting off topic, the grizzly bear, a polar bear and a grizzly bear hybrid, although some people think they're the same species, and so it's really more like a crossbreed, but they have much bigger features. Ligers, though, in particular, those are just, if you look at the cross between a lion and a tiger, just a massive, massive animal. So that's what hybrid vigor is. Now, this is why it's a hard question, is why? Why is it so common for gigantism and bigger features and tougher, more resilient qualities to happen among hybrids? And I have no idea. I have no idea why that happens. It's super weird. It's very observable, and in some cases for humans, in the case of mules, it's advantageous. But why? We know that nature isn't a fan of hybrids. Hybrids tend to be sterile for that reason. And in the case of ligers, even though they're physically very impressive because they're really big and intimidating, they're not cut out for survival. They're if a liger happened in the wild, I don't think there's ever been a documented case. If it did, it would probably starve because they're so big and they need so many calories and they're not very fast and they don't have a lot in the way of endurance. Usually hybrids sort of get really positive characteristics from both parents, but then they're also sterile, so it's not an issue. It doesn't blur the lines between species. Ligers, not so much. They have what appears to be hybrid vigor, but in practice they don't. It's actually very disadvantageous. But why this is the case is really quite confusing. I really don't know. I don't have a good, solid answer. I've told you what it is. I've told you what hybrid vigor is, but the actual phenomena that exemplify why it takes place in both plants and animals, I don't know. It's interesting. Like, share, subscribe, keep asking questions. Bye.